Good morning, everyone. It's March 29th, 20, of course. I have a few things to discuss today, and the first among them is discrepancies in the official narrative from the New Zealand shooting. And this is just a partial list of what this individual found. He says that there are too many anomalous issues not to question anything and just accept what the news conferences and government officials are telling the people of New Zealand. Spent cartridges or castings disappear in midair. There's a man in red. He's in the video throughout. Why wasn't he shot? The man in red walks into just before and in seeing right after, the shooter looks right at him and smiles. Dead man puts on blue socks. How? There's a magazine in the hallway. It was there before the shooters first gets in the building. There's a silver car on the way and points weapon at the driver, but does not shoot. Then after, shooter comes out, license plate visible and readable. The traffic cone blocking the entrance, the locations of the shooters travel at or all intel hotspots, bombs defused on the North Island. The video of the other two shooters who didn't shoot. And there's more. But something somebody said down here really got my attention. It's Bone 75. Bone 75 says, "What scares me the most about this whole situation is that the law-abiding citizen or gun owners of New Zealand aren't putting up much of a fight. I don't think we will either when the time comes." And I have to agree with Bone 75 on this this point, because just look at how many people have already gotten their weapons confiscated, and we're not hearing too much about any resistance, now are we? And these are the same people, a lot of them, who swore that when the cops come or whoever to get their guns, they would resist. But no one has so far. So it makes me wonder, is this individual right? Is Bone 75 right about us, the people of the United States, not putting up any kind of fight either? And if this is the case, what will the aftermath of such an event look like? Will it look like, the purges there in Russia, Germany? Just a thought. So before you go willingly giving up your weapons, maybe you should think about that. And before you go buying weapons out of a sporting goods store or pawn shop or gun shop, you might want to consider or reconsider not doing this, because then somebody knows what you have. And you don't want this. And moving on. Now, I touched on this yesterday. bombshell lawsuit claims FBI knowingly hid evidence from Congress of explosives used on 9/11. Now, wouldn't that make them what is that called? They helped, right? They colluded with whoever planted the explosives in the first place, that they hid the evidence from Congress. This is from Matt Argust. In a major move from the folks over at the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry, Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, and 9/11 victim family members Robert McIvan and Barbara Krukowski. I'm not even going to try to pronounce their names. A joint federal lawsuit has been filed to assess any evidence the FBI may have known about that contributed to the destruction of the towers on 9/11, which they may have kept from Congress. Now, this video may end up getting banned or shadow banned anyway, simply because I'm talking about 9/11. The complaint cites the failure of the FBI and its 9/11 Review Commission to assess key 9/11 related evidence that the FBI can be shown to have had or been aware of regarding: number one, the use of pre-placed explosives to destroy World Trade Center buildings 1, 2, and 7. And 7 is a painfully obvious example, right? No planes hit Building 7, yet it was pulled, as Larry Silverstein called it. Number 2, the arrest and investigation of the high-fivers observed photographing and celebrating the attacks on the World Trade Center on 9/11, and of course they are referring to the dancing Israelis. Why weren't any Israelis prosecuted? Why don't most Americans know about the dancing Israelis? Number 3, terrorist financing related. The report Saudi supported support for the 9/11 hijackers. So there's paper evidence that Saudi Arabia financed the operation, and I would bet the Israeli Mossad were the ones who came up with the plan, which is nothing more than a copy of the plan the CIA presented to John F. Kennedy with regards to Cuba. Okay, number 4, recovered plane parts, including several or serial numbers from all 3 crash locations. Number 5, video from cameras mounted inside and outside the Pentagon, and cell phone communications from passengers aboard airplanes. Now, it was a physical impossibility for any of them people in the air to make cell phone calls from the plane. You still can't do this. You can call while you're on the tarmac. You can call maybe while the plane is landing, but while the plane is moving in the air, you cannot make cell phone calls. It doesn't work like that. According to the press release on the Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, this is evidence relevant to the 9/11 Review Commission and the FBI's compliance with the mandate from Congress, which should have been assessed by the FBI and the 9/11 Review Commission and reported to Congress. The complaint also cites the destruction by the FBI of evidence related to the high-fivers. Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth has joined in bringing the counts that involve the evidence of the World Trade Center's explosive demolition and evidence related to the high-fivers, while the other plaintiffs are party to all counts. So, all these, for the last, how many years? 2001, 18 years, about. The mainstream media has demonized anybody who said the official version of what happened was utter nonsense, utter bullshit. Called them every manner of things, including, but not limited to, conspiracy theorists. Let's see here. As the Free Thought Project previously reported, a monumental step forward in the relentless pursuit of 9/11 truth took place last December when a United States attorney agreed to comply with federal law requiring submission to a special grand jury of evidence that explosives were used to bring down the World Trade Centers. Earlier this month, the group behind the submission, the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry, announced the filing of a petition supplement naming persons who may have information related to the use of said explosives. You know, people like Larry Silverstein, people like Dick Cheney. And let's not forget about all of the people who called out sick that day and didn't give the remaining individuals there a heads up. According to Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, the 33-page document contains 15 different categories of persons who may have information material to the investigation, including contractors and security companies that had access to the World Trade Center towers before 9/11, persons and entities who benefited financially from the World Trade Center demolitions, and persons arrested after being observed celebrating the attacks. And don't forget that the dancing Israelis is no conspiracy theory either. These motherfuckers went on TV there in Israel and bragged. I guess this comes from that attorney's report. A names redacted version of the petition supplement, which was filed with the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York on February 14, 2019, has been made available to the public. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. But why are the names redacted? The unredacted version filed with the U.S. Attorney today will remain undisclosed in the interest of maintaining the secrecy, security, and integrity of the grand jury proceeding. Okay, Well, are these names going to be released afterward? For the first time since 9/11, the federal government is taking steps to hear evidence that explosives may have been used to destroy the World Trade Centers. So, how many more of our conspiracy theories are going to pan out before people come to the realization that most of the time those people presenting not outlandish theories about what happened should maybe be taken into consideration? Anyway, this one is on the Free Thought Project. Speaking of Free Thought Project, here's some more insane actions by dirty-ass cops. Cops filmed themselves viciously beating a suicidal hospital patient for their own pleasure. Isn't that nice of them? But here's a positive for you today. They say what good cops look like, but I'm not going to say that. But sheriff and all deputies quit to protest the unconstitutional jail conditions. They should have probably quit a long time ago due to unconstitutional laws that they are supposed to be enforcing. This is another one I'm going to cover here. Dear America, you cannot be pro-freedom and pro-forced vaccination at the same time. Now, if anything proves that you're not free in this country, the notion that this group of people can decide to force everybody to comply with vaccine laws that may be detrimental to that individual should really give you insight as to just how free you really are. It's hard to think of a more fundamental right than the right to determine what happens to one's own body. Forcing someone to undergo medical treatment against their will violates this most basic of rights: the right to be free from physical assault. Yet even one person not taking every possible precaution against contracting a disease constitutes an assault against another. And this line of thinking requires some very, very tortured logic. What rights? To begin with, nobody has a right to a germ-free environment outside of their own property. Proponents of vaccine mandates assert this right as if it is a long-standing social or legal norm, but it is not. Human beings have been living among each other for millennia, and there has never been a widely asserted right to freedom from any and all pathogens at others' expense. Now, I've said it many, many times. Freedom and authoritarianism cannot exist in the same space and time without serious conflict. And here we are. The conflict has been boiling beneath the surface, and now it's rising to the surface. There has historically been a widely held and asserted expectation of quarantine in the case of exponential dangerous illness. However, this is not at all what the proponents of mandated vaccines are calling for. Quarantine is simply the demand that those who are already infected with the disease remain isolated until there is no longer the ability to affect others. And it's profoundly different from what the pro-mandate people demand, that those who are not infected undergo a medical procedure to minimize their chances of becoming infected. This is a much more intrusive demand and a potentially dangerous one. Furthermore, measles, the scariest thing the mandate pushers can come up with, is not even on the list of federally quarantinable diseases, and rightfully so, as it hardly qualifies as an exceptionally dangerous disease in the developed world. Long before the vaccine was available, the mortality rate had fallen to around 1 in 10,000 cases, and it was widely considered to be a benign childhood illness that nearly everyone contracted, like the chickenpox. And that's next. The chickenpox hysteria is next. People will begin freaking out about that like a bunch of fucking retards. But that's what they are, a bunch of fucking retards. So what has changed in the past few years? How is it all of a sudden measles has gone from a disease not even worthy of mandatory quarantine for the infected to one that has generated mass hysteria and demands for far more intrusive, forced medical intervention against those who are not infected? And what about herd immunity? In 2016, then Libertarian presidential candidate Gary Johnson, which, by the way, we would have been far better off with Gary Johnson in office than Trump, but I digress, announced that he had reversed his position on vaccine mandates and now supported them. The reason? Someone told him about herd immunity. In quotes, I've come to find out that without mandatory vaccines, the vaccine that would in fact be issued would not be effective. And so how is that logical? If the vaccine is produced to make you immune to somebody else's sickness, then how is that even logical? They go on to say, so it's dependent that you have mandatory vaccines so that every child is immune. Otherwise, not all children will be immune even though they received a vaccine. This come from a presidential candidate. And I still say we would have been better off with Gary Johnson than Donald Trump. But he didn't look into it a little more deeply, did he? he would have learned that the theory of vaccine-induced herd immunity is not as solid as its proponents would have us believe. The idea was first put forward by A.W. Hedrick in 1933 based on his observation that measles outbreaks were suppressed when 68% of children had contracted the measles virus. This observation had nothing to do with vaccination, as the measles vaccine had not been developed yet. This is an important distinction for a few reasons. Perhaps mostly, or most importantly, while the immunity conferred by contracting measles lasts a lifetime, that conferred by vaccination does not. What this means is that a 90% vaccination rate does not equate to 90% of the population having immunity, as Dr. Russell Blaylock says. These last two paragraphs for this one here. It was not until relatively recently that it was discovered that most of these vaccines lost their effectiveness 2 to 10 years after being given. What this means is that at least half the population, that is the baby boomers, have had no vaccine-induced immunity against any of these diseases for which they had been vaccinated very early in life. In essence, at least 50% or more of the population was unprotected for decades. So this notion of needing a vaccine to protect you is false on its face. Now, if we listen to present-day wisdom, if you want to call it that, we are all at risk of resurgent massive epidemics should the vaccination rate fall between or below 95%. Yet, we have all lived for the last 30 to 40 years with 50% or less of the population having vaccine protection. That is, herd immunity has not existed in this country for many decades, and no resurgent epidemics have occurred. Vaccine-induced herd immunity is a lie used to frighten doctors, public health officials, and other medical personnel, along with the public, so they accept mandatory vaccinations. So, Gary Johnson was an idiot for believing what he was told. He should have dug into the notion of herd immunity a little bit more deeply, and he would have found the fallacies in this theory. I would like to call it a conspiracy theory. Anyway, thought I would share these with you. I hope all of you have a good day. If I see anything else, I'll holler back at you. Till next time, kill the state, live free.